didn't just want a divorce. Gregory and his ruthless mother wanted to scrub Samantha from existence. They tossed her into a blizzard with $5,000 and a broken heart. They thought she was trash. They thought she was a starter wife whose usefulness had run dry. But arrogance makes people careless, and the Daltons made a fatal calculation. They forgot to check the file. They didn't know the quiet woman scrubbing their floors had a name on her birth certificate that wasn't just a label. It was a landmine. And the moment they kicked her out, they stepped right on the trigger. But to understand how an empire collapses, you have to witness the moment the pin was pulled. Snow clung to the wrought iron gates of the Dalton estate in Westchester, like wet bandages on a fresh wound. Outside, it was a typical New York deep freeze. Inside the library, the temperature was absolute zero. Samantha stood in the center of the room, shivering, not from the cold, from the shock of her life fracturing in real time. "It's done, Sam. Stop shaking. You're making a scene." Gregory didn't even look up. He leaned back in his leather executive chair, one hand swirling a glass of scotch, the other scrolling through texts on his iPhone, probably from Brittany, the 23-year-old receptionist. The one he'd been mentoring late into the night for 6 months. Samantha stared at him. She felt the 10 years she had given him pressing down on her chest like a stone. She remembered dropping out of Parsons to wait tables at a greasy diner, coming home smelling of stale coffee just to pay for his MBA suits. She had built him, brick by brick. "Gregory," she whispered. Her voice sounded brittle, like dry leaves. "You can't just tell me to leave. This is my home." Correction. The word cut through the air like a sniper shot. Lucille Dalton sat in the shadows of a high-backed velvet armchair. She took a slow, deliberate sip of tea from a cup Samantha had washed by hand that morning. "It was your residence, dear," Lucille said. Her eyes glittered with a decade of held-back malice. "But let's be honest, you never really fit the furniture. You were a placeholder, a sturdy, reliable placeholder, until Gregory was ready for the real thing." Samantha felt the blood drain from her face. "A placeholder? I'm his wife, Lucille. I nursed you through pneumonia when your own son couldn't be bothered to leave the golf course." "And you were compensated," Gregory interrupted, finally bored of his phone. He slid a check across the polished mahogany desk. It stopped at the edge, teetering. $5,000, he stated flat. "Consider it severance. It's plenty for a fresh start in wherever people like you go." Samantha looked at the check. It was an insult, a calculated spit in the face. "Severance? We have a prenup, Gregory, but..." "The prenup is ironclad," he snapped. "You get what you came in with, which, if I recall, was a suitcase of rags and a rusted Honda Civic." "I signed that because I trusted you," Samantha cried, the tears finally spilling over. "You said we were partners." Gregory laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Business is business, Sam. Look at you. You're tired. You've let yourself go. Brittany fits the image of a CEO's wife. You're still just the waitress I met at the diner. You never really washed the grease off." Lucille stood up. "Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. Leave the jewelry, leave the car keys, and for heaven's sake, don't steal the silverware on your way out." It was an eviction of her soul. "You're throwing me out?" Samantha whispered. "In a blizzard? With nothing?" "You have legs," Lucille sneered, turning her back. "Use them." Samantha stared at the check. Gregory smirked, waiting for her to grab it, waiting for her to beg. Instead, a terrifying calm washed over her face. She reached out and backhanded the check off the desk. It fluttered to the floor, near Gregory's Italian loafers. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice steady. "And I don't want your pity." She buttoned her thin coat and walked to the heavy oak doors. But before she left, she turned back one last time. "Remember this moment, Gregory. You think you're standing tall, but you're standing on a foundation I poured." She looked him dead in the eye. "And you didn't check the concrete before you let it set." The heavy door slammed shut, echoing like a gunshot. Gregory chuckled, picking up his phone to text Brittany the good news. He thought she was gone. He thought she was powerless. He had no idea Samantha wasn't walking away empty-handed. She was walking away with a secret, and the countdown to his destruction had already begun. "When I leave, Gregory, I take my luck with me." Gregory threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, barking sound that grated against the silence of the library. "Oh, spare us the melodrama, Sam. Just get out before I have security drag you down the driveway. Samantha didn't argue. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked to the coat closet. She bypassed the cashmere trench coat Gregory had bought her for Christmas, a prop for his holiday parties. And she reached for her old, worn denim jacket, the same jacket she was wearing the day they met. She slipped it on, buttoning it over her chest like armor. Then she stepped out the front door. The wind hit her like a physical blow. The snow was blinding, swirling in a white vortex that erased the world a few feet in front of her. As she trudged down the long, winding driveway, the heavy wrought iron gates began to swing shut automatically. She heard it, the distinct, mechanical click of the lock engaging. She was alone. No car, no money, no home. Just the biting cold and the echoing memory of the man she had loved more than life itself, laughing at her pain. But as Samantha fought her way toward the main road, fighting the numbness already nipping at her fingers, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about a phone number, a sequence of digits she had memorized 20 years ago and promised herself she would never, ever call. She fumbled for her phone. Gregory hadn't bothered to take it. It was an iPhone 8 with a cracked screen, hardly worth his time. Her fingers were stiff, blue with cold, but she dialed. It rang once, twice. Law offices of Kensington and Wright. How may I direct your call? The voice was crisp, professional, dripping with Manhattan elitism. Put me through to Harrison, Samantha said, her teeth chattering so hard the words barely came out. There was a pause on the line, a beat of confusion. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Kensington does not take unsolicited calls. If you would like to schedule a consultation, the waitlist is currently... Tell him, Samantha interrupted. She looked back at the Dalton mansion, looming on the hill like a fortress of cruelty. Tell him his daughter is ready to come in from the cold. 3 weeks later, Gregory Dalton felt invincible. The divorce proceedings were moving faster than a freight train, and he was the conductor. His lawyer, Arthur P. Grimshaw, a man known in New York legal circles as the Shark, had assured him it was an open and shut case. Samantha had no assets, no high-powered counsel, and the prenup was watertight. Gregory spent his days finalizing the merger between his company, Dalton Tech, and a massive conglomerate, and his nights wining and dining Brittany at the city's most exclusive spots. Life wasn't just continuing, it was upgrading. You look tense, babe, Brittany purred, tracing the rim of her martini glass with a manicured fingernail. They were at Lou Bernardine, at the best table in the house, surrounded by the quiet hum of power and money. Just anticipation, Gregory smiled. Though his stomach was in knots, the merger was the biggest deal of his life. If it went through, he wouldn't just be rich, he'd be wealthy for generations. The shareholders are meeting next week, he said. Once the divorce is finalized this Friday, I'm a free man with a clean slate. The board loves stability, and getting rid of the dead weight was actually a recommendation from the consultants. Dead weight? Brittany giggled. She really was, wasn't she? I saw a picture of her on your iCloud. So plain. She served a purpose, Gregory said, dismissive, slicing into his filet mignon. But you don't keep the training wheels on when you're ready to ride the Ducati. Whatever guilt Gregory might have felt was easily washed away by the validation of his mother, Lucille. She called him daily, congratulating him on reclaiming the family dignity. To them, Samantha had just been a temporary employee who had overstayed her contract, a bad investment they had finally liquidated. But across the East River, Samantha was living a very different reality. She wasn't staying at the Plaza, and she wasn't in a penthouse, not yet. She was in a small, nondescript guest room, in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It was comfortable, warm, and it smelled of old books and lemon polish. Sitting across from her was Henry Cole. Henry didn't look like a killer. He wore a knitted cardigan. He looked like a kindly grandfather who handed out Werther's or RIJ nulls, and he worked out of a small home office that smelled of pipe tobacco. But anyone who knew the real history of New York law knew Henry Cole didn't just win cases. He dismantled them. He was the kind of lawyer you called when you didn't want a settlement. You wanted a burial. They filed for an expedited hearing, Henry said, his voice gravely and soft. He slid a thick document across the coffee table. Friday, at 9 a.m., Judge Patterson is presiding. He's a tough old bird, conservative, usually favors the breadwinner. Henry peered over his spectacles. Grimshaw is counting on you not showing up, or showing up with a public defender who hasn't had time to read the brief. Samantha stared at the paperwork. The words swam before her eyes. Irreconcilable differences. Failure to contribute to marital assets. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. Failure to contribute? I managed the household accounts for a decade. I introduced him to the investor that saved his company in 2018. Remember Mr. Henderson? I was the one who charmed him at the charity gala while Gregory was too drunk to speak. We know, Samantha, Henry said, softly. But in the eyes of the court, without documentation, that's just hearsay. The prenup waives your right to spousal support, unless we can prove duress or fraud. Samantha looked up. The fear that had paralyzed her in the library was gone. In its place was something colder, something hereditary. I don't want spousal support, Henry, Samantha said, her eyes flashing with steel, a steeliness that reminded Henry vividly of her father. I don't want his money. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. I want justice, and I know exactly where the bodies are buried. Henry smiled, slow, dangerous. It didn't reach his eyes. Good, because on Friday, we're not just going to court, Samantha. We're going to war. I want them to understand something fundamental, Samantha continued, her voice steady. They didn't just discard a wife. They discarded the only thing protecting them from the wolves. Henry smiled again, a slow, dangerous curl of the lips, blood in the water. I spoke to your father this morning. Samantha stiffened. She hadn't spoken to the man in 20 years. He's eager, Henry continued. He wanted to buy the distressed debt holding Gregory's mortgage and foreclose immediately. Kick him out of the mansion by Monday. But I told him to wait. That's too messy, too emotional. Henry leaned forward, tapping a thick manila folder. We have something much more surgical. I've been digging into Dalton Tech's financials, Henry said, opening the file. Gregory has been sloppy. Arrogant men usually are. To push this merger through, he's been leveraging assets he doesn't fully own. The warehouse in the meatpacking district? Samantha asked. Exactly. And the patent for the core predictive algorithm. But, Samantha frowned, confused. He lists those as sole property of Dalton Tech. I saw the prospectus. Technically, on paper, yes, Henry said. But the original seed funding for those specific assets came from a distinct entity, a silent angel investor, back when the company was just a laptop in a garage. Do you remember who signed the check that kept the lights on in 2013? Samantha closed her eyes, thinking back to the days of ramen noodles, overdue rent notices, and Gregory's constant panic attacks. It was the Artemis Group, she said. Gregory said it was some boutique venture capital firm in Delaware. The Artemis Group, Henry nodded. A shell company, wholly owned by a blind trust, established in 1993. He paused for maximum effect. The sole beneficiary of that trust is you, Samantha. The room went dead silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner sounded like a bomb, counting down. Me? Samantha whispered. Your father set it up when you ran away to be with Gregory, Henry said. He knew he couldn't stop you, and he knew you were too proud to take his money directly. So he funneled it into Gregory's business, so you wouldn't starve. Henry sat back, looking satisfied. Gregory Dalton doesn't own his company, Samantha. In a roundabout, legal, and completely binding way, you do. Samantha felt the breath leave her lungs. For 10 years, Gregory had strutted around like a king, claiming he was a self-made genius, belittling her for her lack of ambition. All the while, he was spending her money. His success wasn't just built on her labor. It was built on her inheritance. Does he know? She asked. No, and neither does his lawyer, Grimshaw. They think the Artemis Group is just a silent partner they can buy out after the merger closes. Henry closed the folder with a heavy thud. On Friday, we aren't just going to contest the divorce, Samantha. We're going to audit the marriage. He humiliated me, Samantha said, her voice trembling with a volatile mix of grief and fury. He threw me in the snow like garbage. Henry stood up and offered her a hand. Then on Friday, we will bury him in an avalanche. Friday morning arrived under a leaden gray sky. The New York State Supreme Court at 60 Center Street was buzzing with the usual morning chaos. But courtroom 302 was packed. The divorce of Gregory Dalton, the rising tech star, was minor news in the grand scheme of Manhattan. But the presence of Arthur P. Grimshaw ensured a gallery full of legal interns and curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the shark devour a helpless victim. Gregory arrived in a charcoal Armani suit, looking every inch the victor. Lucille was on his arm, draped in vintage furs. She looked at the courtroom benches with undisguised disdain. Brittany was there too, sitting in the second row, trying to look demure, in a navy dress, slightly too tight for a legal setting. "She's late," Gregory muttered, checking his ROH-Lex. It was 8:58 a.m. Probably couldn't afford the subway fare, Lucille snickered, adjusting her gloves. "Don't worry, darling. If she's a no-show, we get a default judgment. It's cleaner that way." Grimshaw leaned over the defense table, a man who looked like a bulldog stuffed into a pinstriped suit. "If she does show up, don't say a word, Gregory. Let me handle the theatrics. We'll paint her as a bitter gold digger who contributed nothing to the empire you built." At 9 a.m. sharp, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The room didn't go silent immediately. It was a gradual hush, starting from the back row and rolling forward like a wave as heads turned. Samantha walked in. She wasn't wearing the rags they expected. She wasn't wearing the cheap department store suit she used to wear to church. She was wearing a tailored ivory white power suit, one that cost more than Gregory's car. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was sleek, straight, and sharp enough to cut glass. She wore dark sunglasses. She removed them slowly as she walked down the center aisle. The click of her heels on the marble floor echoed like hammer strikes. But it wasn't her appearance that caused the stir. It was the man walking beside her. Arthur Grimshaw's jaw literally dropped. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he was having a cardiac event. He nudged Gregory violently. Is that Henry Cole?" "Who?" Gregory asked, oblivious, still staring at Samantha's suit. "Henry Cole," Grimshaw hissed, a line of sweat instantly appearing on his upper lip. "He hasn't taken a divorce case in 20 years. He represents royalty. He represents sovereign nations. Why the hell is he walking with your wife?" Samantha reached the defendant's table. She didn't look at Gregory. She didn't look at Lucille. She pulled out her chair with deliberate grace, and she sat down. Only then did she turn. She looked past Gregory's confused face and locked eyes with Grimshaw. She offered him a small, terrifying smile. Grimshaw swallowed hard. He realized, with a sinking feeling in his gut, he wasn't the shark in this tank anymore. He was the bait. Samantha didn't look at Gregory. She didn't look at Lucille. She simply pulled a heavy fountain pen from her bag and placed it on the defense table with a precise, deliberate click. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Patterson swept in, looking bored, already checking his watch. "Docket number 44,492. Dalton versus Dalton. Let's make this quick, counselors. I have a full calendar today." Grimshaw stood up, smoothing his jacket, trying to regain his composure. "Your Honor, Arthur Grimshaw for the plaintiff. My client seeks a dissolution of marriage based on the prenup signed 10 years ago. We are also asking for a summary dismissal of any alimony claims, citing the defendant's total lack of financial contribution to the marital estate." The judge nodded, barely looking up from his file. And for the defense, Henry stood, slowly. He didn't smooth his jacket. He didn't posture. He didn't need to. Henry Cole for the defendant. "And Your Honor, we are filing a counter motion." "A counter motion?" Judge Patterson raised a skeptical eyebrow. "On what grounds?" "Mr. Cole, the prenup is standard boilerplate. If you're looking for a loophole, we are not contesting the prenup, Your Honor," Henry said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the silent room. "We are enforcing it. Specifically, the clause regarding the division of assets acquired independently of the marital union." Gregory leaned over to Grimshaw, whispering loudly enough for the front row to hear. "What the hell is he doing? I have all the assets. She has nothing." "Shut up," Grimshaw hissed back, a bead of sweat tracking down his temple. "Just shut up." "Go on, Mr. Cole," Judge Patterson said, suddenly interested. "My client," Henry continued, gesturing calmly to Samantha, "was forcibly removed from the marital residence 3 weeks ago, without resources. The plaintiff claimed the home, the cars, and the business, Dalton Tech, were his sole property. Henry paused. However, we have evidence that suggests a significant fraudulent misrepresentation of asset ownership. Objection, Grimshaw roared, jumping to his feet. This is a fishing expedition. Gregory Dalton built that company from the ground up. With whose money? Henry asked, sharp, cutting through the noise. Venture capital, Gregory shouted. Unable to help himself, he stood up, his face flushing red. The R. Thomas Group. I secured that funding myself. Henry smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just watched a rabbit run willingly into the snare. Exactly, Henry said. The A.R. Thomas Group. He walked to the bench, handed a thin blue file to the judge, then dropped a copy onto Grimshaw's table. It landed with a heavy slap. Your Honor, I am submitting into evidence the original incorporation papers of the Artemis Group. Henry turned to Grimshaw. Read the name of the sole beneficiary, counselor. Grimshaw opened the file. His face went from pale to ghostly white in the span of a second. He looked at the paper, then at Samantha, then back at the paper. His hands started to shake. Read it, Henry commanded. Samantha Kensington. Grimshaw swallowed hard, the name sticking in his throat. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Kensington? Lucille whispered loudly from the gallery, her hand flying to her pearls. Like the hotel chain? The bank? Like Harrison Kensington, Henry corrected. Turning to face the gallery, locking eyes with Lucille, the industrialist. Gregory looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He blinked, his brain misfiring. What? No. Sam's last name is Hayes. She's a nobody from Ohio. Her mother was a school teacher. Her mother's maiden name was Hayes. Samantha spoke for the first time. Her voice was crystal clear, cutting through the confusion like a diamond. She turned to look at her husband. I used it because I wanted to know if a man could love me for me, Gregory, not for my father's billions. She paused, her expression unreadable, behind her sunglasses. I got my answer. The judge was reading the documents, his eyes widening with every line. Mr. Grimshaw, Judge Patterson said, his voice grave. This document shows the A.R. Thomas Group provided 85% of the initial seed funding for Dalton Tech. It also states the funding was structured as a conditional loan. A loan? Gregory stammered. Callable at any time by the beneficiary, Henry finished for the judge. Callable, Gregory choked out. It means, Henry said, turning his entire body to face Gregory, that you owe the R. Thomas Group, and by extension Samantha, $12 million plus 10 years of compound interest. Payable immediately. Henry leaned in closer. Or, under the default terms of the loan, you forfeit all intellectual property and physical assets to the lender. This is insane, Gregory screamed, standing up. His face was a mask of purple rage. She's lying. She served coffee. She doesn't know anything about business. Sit down, Mr. Dalton, the judge barked, slamming his gavel. But wait, Your Honor, there's more, Henry said, holding up a single finger. Since Mr. Dalton evicted the beneficiary from her home, he violated the good faith clause of the investment agreement. That triggers the penalty protocol. Henry turned to the judge, his voice dropping to a lethal, quiet register. Your Honor, we move to freeze all assets of Dalton Tech and Gregory Dalton personally, pending a forensic audit. We also move to immediately invalidate the non-disclosure agreement regarding the upcoming merger, as the primary stakeholder, Mrs. Dalton, was not consulted. Merger? The judge looked at Gregory, his eyes narrowing into slits. Mr. Dalton, were you attempting to sell a company you didn't fully own? Gregory opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Grimshaw, but the shark was staring at the floor, defeated. He looked at Brittany, but she was already checking her phone, distancing herself from the blast radius. Then he looked at Samantha. She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were dry, cold, absolutely terrifying. He wasn't just selling it, Your Honor, Samantha said softly. He was selling it to my father's competitors. The judge slammed the gavel down. Motion granted, assets frozen. The merger is enjoined, effective immediately. Gregory collapsed into his chair. He hadn't just lost the divorce. He had just lost his past, his present, and his future. But the real horror was only just beginning, because Henry Cole was already pulling a second file out of his briefcase. I own it, Gregory screamed. leaping to his feet, veins bulging in his neck. "She's just a wife. She's nothing." "She," Henry Cole interrupted, his voice booming, filling the cavernous courtroom, "is the woman who paid for your suits. She is the woman who paid for your office rent in 2015. And she is the woman whose name you just dragged through the mud." "Enough," Judge Patterson shouted, slamming his gavel again. "Motion granted. Assets frozen, effective immediately. Mr. Dalton, you are surrendering your passport. Do not leave the jurisdiction. Mr. Grimshaw, get your client under control, or I will hold you both in contempt." The courtroom erupted. Reporters were frantically tapping texts to their editors. In the gallery, Brittany, the 23-year-old future Mrs. Dalton, stood up. She took one look at the red-faced bankrupt man at the defense table, realized the ATM was permanently out of order, and slipped out the side exit without a backward glance. Gregory stood there, shaking. He turned to Samantha. For the first time in years, he actually saw her. He saw the power in her posture, the cold, terrifying intelligence in her eyes. "Sam," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Sam, we can talk about this." "Baby, please." Samantha stood up. She smoothed the lapels of her white power suit. She looked him in the eye, and the entire room held its breath. "You're right, Gregory," she said calmly. "The prenup is ironclad. You leave with what you came in with." She paused, her eyes dropping to his wrist. "Actually, I paid for that Arrochlex day date. Take it off." Gregory froze. "What? Take it off?" He fumbled with the clasp, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He slid the watch across the table. Samantha didn't even look at it. She just turned and walked away. The walk from the courtroom to the parking lot felt less like an exit and more like a funeral procession for Gregory Dalton's ego. The press, usually uninterested in the divorce proceedings of mid-level tech CEOs, had been tipped off. The name Ken Zing-Tun had gone out, over the police scanners and court blogs, like a distress flare. By the time Gregory pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse, a wall of flashbulbs blinded him. "Mr. Dalton, is it true you tried to defraud Harrison Kensington's daughter? Did you really throw her out in a blizzard? Gregory, are you insolvent?" The questions were like darts, piercing the armor of arrogance he'd worn so comfortably just an hour ago. Beside him, Lucille was using her crocodile skin handbag to shield her face, muttering curses about vultures and low-class peasants. Arthur P. Grimshaw, the shark, was nowhere to be seen. He had slipped out the back entrance the moment the assets were frozen, realizing a broke client is a non-paying client. Gregory pushed through the mob, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached his Aston Martin, DB11, fumbling for the fob. He needed to get to the office. He needed to fix this. It was just a misunderstanding, a leverage play. He could smooth it over. He slid into the driver's seat and punched the start button. The engine sputtered and died. The digital dashboard lit up with a single terrifying message. Bright red letters. "Remote disable. Contact lender." "No," Gregory hissed, jamming the button again. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Lucille shrieked from the passenger seat, as a cameraman pressed his lens against the glass. "Start the car, Gregory. These people are touching the windows." "They killed the car," Gregory whispered, staring at the dashboard in horror. "The lease. It's under the company name. The assets are frozen. They had to take a taxi. The ride to Dalton Tech was silent, filled only with the heavy breathing of two people watching their world collapse in real time. When they finally arrived at the Glass and Steel Tower in Midtown, Gregory didn't even wait for his change. He sprinted into the lobby, ignoring the startled look of the security guard, a man named Ralph, whom Gregory hadn't bothered to greet in 5 years. "Mr. Dalton, wait," Ralph called out, stepping out from behind the desk. "Access has been restricted." Gregory spun around, his face flushed. "Restricted? I own this building. I am the CEO." "Not as of 20 minutes ago, sir," Ralph said, looking uncomfortable but firm. "We got a call from the receivership court. A Mr. Henry Cole sent over a writ. No one enters the executive suite without a federal monitor present. Your badge has been deactivated." Gregory stared at the turnstiles. The little light on the scanner was a solid, unyielding red. He looked around the lobby. Employees were whispering, glancing at him over their lattes. He saw it in their eyes, pity, or worse, amusement. They knew. The email had probably already gone out. Fine, Gregory spat, straightening his jacket with trembling hands. I'll work from home. I have the merger call at 2 p.m. anyway. I don't need this office. But the nightmare was only beginning. By the time Gregory and Lucille returned to the Westchester mansion, via a second taxi, a taxi Gregory had to pay for, with crumpled cash he found in his pocket. Because his corporate Amex had been declined, the reality of the freeze was setting in. The mansion was eerily quiet. Usually at this hour, the housekeeper, Maria, would be vacuuming, or the cook would be prepping lunch. Maria, Lucille called out, dropping her furs on the entry bench. We need tea and something strong for Gregory. Silence. They walked into the expansive kitchen. It was empty. On the marble island sat a neat pile of keys and a handwritten note. Lucille snatched it up, her eyes scanning the paper. Mrs. Dalton, she read, her voice shaking. The agency called. They said the automatic payroll deposit for this month was reversed due to insufficient funds. We have been instructed to cease work immediately. We have taken the liberty of clearing out the perishables as payment for the last week. Maria. Lucille stared at the massive Sub-Zero refrigerator, the doors slightly ajar. They took the truffles, she whispered, horrified. They took the champagne. They took the staff. Mother, Gregory said, sinking onto a bar stool. He put his head in his hands. It's over. The merger. Sterling won't sign if the assets are frozen. The deal is dead. Don't you dare say that, Lucille snapped, her survival instincts finally kicking in. She grabbed his shoulder, digging her nails in. You are a Dalton. We do not lose to trash like Samantha. She's bluffing. She wants you back, that's all. This is a tantrum. A very expensive tantrum. Gregory looked up at his mother. His eyes were hollow. She's a Kensington mother, he whispered. This isn't a tantrum. It's an execution. Just then, the house phone on the wall began to ring, a shrill, piercing sound in the empty house. Gregory stared at it. Only one person called the landline, this time of day. He picked it up slowly. Hello? Gregory, a voice said on the other end. It wasn't Samantha. It was a man's voice, low, calm, terrifyingly familiar. This is Harrison Kensington. I suggest you look out your front window. The moving trucks just arrived. Do you know what this means? Gregory looked up from the receiver, his eyes wild, like a trapped animal. It means she has more liquid cash in her checking account than my company has in total valuation. She doesn't want me back, Mother. She wants to crush me into dust. Suddenly, his cell phone buzzed against the marble countertop. It was the only line of communication still active, likely because the ATOPay wasn't scheduled until tomorrow. The caller ID flashed, Sterling Enterprises, CEO office. Gregory took a ragged breath. He smoothed his hair, wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had to charm his way out of this. He had to be the salesman, one last time. Mr. Sterling, Gregory answered, forcing a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching. I assume you've heard the rumors. Just a little legal hiccup with the ex-wife. Standard divorce leverage. Nothing that affects the IP or the Gregory. The voice on the other end wasn't angry. It was colder than that. It sounded like liquid nitrogen. I'm not calling about rumors. I'm calling because I just had a very interesting lunch with Harrison Kensington. Gregory's blood turned to slush in his veins. Harrison showed me some documentation, Sterling continued, his voice precise and clipped. Specifically regarding the authorship of the source code you're trying to sell me. It seems you didn't write the core predictive AL-Go rhythm, Gregory. Your wife did. That's a lie, Gregory stammered, gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. She's an art school dropout. She waits tables. She has a dual degree in mathematics and computer science from MIT under her maiden name, Gregory. She dropped out of art school to hide from the press, not because she couldn't hack it. Sterling paused, letting the silence stretch until it was unbearable. The timestamps on the original GitHub repository match her personal laptop, which her lawyers just submitted into evidence. You tried to sell me stolen goods. My legal team is currently drafting a suit for bad faith negotiation. Expect to be served by morning. Do not contact me again. Click. Gregory dropped the phone. It clattered onto the expensive Italian tile, the screen shattering. What did he say? Lucille asked, her voice trembling. Sam wrote the code. Gregory whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. He thought back to those late nights in their cramped apartment 10 years ago. He remembered complaining about the bugs in the software, banging his fists on the desk. He remembered her looking over his shoulder, holding a basket of laundry, pointing at the screen and saying, "Maybe if you move that bracket there." Or close the variable loop. He had thought she was just guessing. He had thought she was just lucky. She hadn't been guessing. She had been fixing his incompetence for a decade. She played us, Lucille hissed, her face twisting. The little witch played the long game. We have to fix this. Gregory stood up, pacing the kitchen, his shoes clicking, frantic on the floor. We need money. Cash. We need to hire a new lawyer. A pit bull who isn't afraid of the Kensingtons. We need to fight the asset freeze. I have my jewelry, Lucille said, clutching the pearls at her throat. And the artwork. The artwork is insured under the company policy, Gregory said. We can't sell it without triggering an alert. But the jewelry? Yes. Gather it up. We'll go to the broker on 47th Street. It was a desperate plan, a humiliating plan, but it was all they had. An hour later, Lucille Dalton, the queen of Westchester High Society, walked into a cramped, fluorescent-lit shop in the Diamond District. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and desperation. She placed a velvet bag on the counter with the air of a deposed monarch offering the crown jewels. The broker was a man with a jeweler's loop permanently stuck to his eye. He dumped the contents onto a felt tray. He picked up the heavy diamond necklace Gregory had given Lucille for her 60th birthday. He examined it for 3 seconds. Then he picked up the sapphire ring, then the emerald brooch. He put the loop down and looked at Lucille with a bored expression. I can give you $400 for the gold weight, he said, turning back to his ledger. Lucille gasped. 400? These are worth 50,000. That necklace is a Van Cleef. It's an investment piece. It's a replica, lady, the broker said, flat. High-quality cubic zirconia, set in 14-karat gold plating. It's paste, all of it. Lucille froze. She turned slowly to Gregory. Gregory, she whispered, you bought these. You told me they were investment pieces. You told me they were our safety net. Gregory's face was the color of ash. He remembered the years of tight budgets, the years he needed to look rich while drowning in debt. He had bought the fakes to keep his mother happy, to keep up appearances, telling himself he would replace them with real ones once the company really took off. He had never gotten around to it. I had cash flow issues, Gregory mumbled, backing away. The liquidity was tight. Lucille didn't scream. She didn't yell. She simply walked over to her son and slapped him across the face. The sound was sharp, loud, echoing in the small, dusty shop. You are a failure, she whispered, her eyes dead, and you have dragged me into the gutter with you. They walked out of the shop with nothing. Snow had started to fall again, covering the city in a deceptively beautiful white blanket. But this time, they weren't the ones inside the warm mansion looking out. They were on the street, and the cold was biting deep. Desperation makes people do dangerous things. For Gregory Dalton, stripped of his fortune, his car, and his dignity, the only currency he had left was his voice. If he couldn't beat Samantha in the courtroom, he would destroy her in the living rooms of America. It was Brittany who inadvertently gave him the weapon. She met him at Starbucks an hour later, not to offer support. To return his spare apartment key, she refused to even sit down. You're trending, Greg, she said, looking at her phone with a mix of pity and disgust as she backed toward the door, but not in a good way. Gregory pulled out his cracked phone. He opened Twitter. He saw the hashtags. He saw the articles. The narrative was spinning out of control. But as he scrolled, a dark, twisted idea began to form in the wreckage of his mind. He realized he didn't need the truth. He just needed a camera and a story that would make the world hate Samantha Kensington. He opened the video app and hit record. He wiped the tears from his eyes, not to hide them, to make sure they caught the light. My name is Gregory Dalton, he spoke into the lens, his voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. And I am a victim of domestic abuse. Everyone is calling you the Ice King because of the Blizzard story, Brittany had said earlier, her voice dripping with the kind of pragmatic cynicism only a social climber could master. But people love a redemption arc, or a victim, I am the victim, Gregory insisted. Grabbing her hand across the sticky Starbucks table, she pulled it away, wiping her palm on her jeans. She lied to me for 10 years, Brittany. She pretended to be poor. That's fraud. So say that, Brittany said, standing up and shouldering her bag. Go on TV. Cry. Say she manipulated you. Say she was a spy for her father the whole time, trying to steal your ideas. People hate billionaires, Greg. Play the underdog. She left him with the bill for 2 oat milk lattes. He paid with the absolute last of the cash in his pocket. But the seed was planted, a poisonous seed. And in the fertile soil of Gregory's narcissism, it bloomed overnight. 2 days later, Gregory sat in the sleek, overly lit studio of The Morning Truth, a tabloid talk show known for sensationalism and a loose relationship with facts. The host was a man named Chip Darrow, orange tan, veneers white enough to signal aircraft. He leaned in with faux sympathy. So, let me get this straight, Gregory, Chip said to the camera, his brow furrowed in performance. You marry a woman you think is a struggling waitress. You support her, you build a life, and the whole time, she is secretly the heiress to the Kensington Empire? Spying on your tech company? It broke my heart, Chip, Gregory said, looking directly into the lens with practiced sadness. He even managed a slight wobble in his voice. I loved Samantha. I didn't care about the money, but she was taking notes. She was feeding my proprietary data to her father's conglomerates. And when I finally confronted her, when I asked for a divorce, because I couldn't handle the betrayal, she used her father's lawyers to freeze me out. She threw me out. And the story about her being kicked out in a blizzard? Chip prompted. Fabricated, Gregory lied smoothly. She took a private car. She staged that photo of her walking in the snow. It's all a PR stunt to ruin a self-made man. The interview aired live. In the quiet brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, Samantha watched the screen, her face impassive. Henry Cole sat beside her, jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. He's good, Henry admitted, the distaste in his voice palpable. Lying through his teeth, but he's selling it. The social media sentiment is shifting. People are already calling you a corporate spy. Samantha took a calm sip of her tea. She set the cup down with a delicate click. He forgot about the security system. Henry looked up. The one at the mansion? Gregory was always so proud of his smart home, Samantha said. A cold, terrifying smile touching her lips. He installed cameras everywhere. The driveway, the library, the porch. He wanted to monitor the staff to make sure they weren't stealing time. She turned to Henry. But he forgot that I was the AD-min for the cloud account. You have the footage? Henry asked, his pen hovering. I have everything, Samantha said. Him laughing. Lucille checking her watch. Me begging. The gates locking behind me. She leaned forward. And I have something else. Audio from the library. Crystal clear. Release it, Henry said, instantly. Not to the court, to the internet. Within an hour, the narrative didn't just shift, it capsized. Samantha didn't go on a talk show. She didn't hire a publicist. She simply posted a single video file to a new Twitter account with the handle @TheRealSamantha. The caption was 3 words, the truth about winter. The video opened with time-stamped security footage. The resolution was 4K. It showed Samantha, the tear-streaked and shivering, standing before Gregory and Lucille in the library. And the audio was studio quality. You were a placeholder, a sturdy, reliable placeholder. Consider it severance pay. You're still just the waitress I met at the diner. Throw her out, and for heaven's sake, don't take the silverware. Then, the hard cut to the exterior camera, the heavy gates closing, Samantha walking alone into the blinding white vortex of snow. And in the upper window of the mansion, Gregory was clearly visible, holding a drink, watching her disappear into the storm. The internet exploded. The hashtags changed instantly. #JusticeForSamantha trended #1 globally within 20 minutes. #BoycottDaltonTech followed. But the most damaging one was simple. #placeholder. Women all over the world began sharing their stories of being used and discarded, rallying behind Samantha like an army. Gregory was in the green room of the TV studio, waiting to be congratulated, when his phone started buzzing uncontrollably. Not calls, notifications, thousands of them. He opened Twitter. He saw the video. He saw the comments. He left her to die in the cold. Lucille Dalton is a monster. I hope she takes every penny. The door to the green room banged open. Chip Darrow walked in, but the sympathy was gone. You need to leave, Chip said coldly, now. Before the protesters blocked the exit. But the segment, Gregory stammered. We're retracting it, Chip snapped. We can't be seen supporting a monster. You lied to us, Gregory. Get out. Gregory ran out the back door, pulling his jacket over his head to hide from the few photographers already gathering. But the real blow came when he got back to the temporary apartment he was renting, week to week. The door was unlocked. Brittany was there, and she was packing her bags. Brittany? Gregory asked, breathless. She didn't look at him. She zipped up her Louis Vuitton duffel, the one he had bought her. I saw the video, Gregory, she said, her voice flat. She didn't even look at him. She was checking her Uber status. It was edited, Gregory cried, desperation clawing at his throat. It's out of context. That footage... She was crying, Greg. Brittany cut him off, her eyes snapping up. You laughed at her. You and your mother were drinking tea in a warm library while she walked into a blizzard. I can handle a jerk. I can even handle a broke jerk. But I can't handle a sociopath. Brittany, please. I have nothing else. We're in this together. No, Brittany said, stepping back. We're not. I dated a CEO. I didn't date a broke, lying abuser. She walked past him, the wheels of her suitcase rolling over his toes. She opened the door, but before she left, she turned back. One final piece of information. Oh, and Greg, you might want to check the news. The district attorney just announced a press conference. They're not just looking at the fraud anymore. They're looking at the tax returns you filed jointly for the last 5 years. She slammed the door. The sound echoed in the cheap, temporary apartment like a gunshot. Gregory stood in the silence, listening to the sound of sirens getting closer and closer. Then the phone rang again. It was Lucille. Gregory? She didn't sound like the Iron Lady of Westchester anymore. She sounded small, broken. The police are here. Gregory gripped the phone. Police? Why? Is it about the protest? They have a warrant, Gregory. For the house. For the computers. They're tearing the library apart. Lucille began to sob. A jagged, ugly sound. They're talking about embezzlement. They're saying I spent company money on personal accounts. They're saying you authorized it. Gregory dropped the phone. The freeze was no longer just about money. It was about freedom. Samantha wasn't just taking the company. She was coming for their lives. The courtroom for the final hearing was different this time. This wasn't the sterile quiet of family court. This was the superior court, the venue for complex fraud and corporate malfeasance. And it was packed. Samantha sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Henry Cole and a phalanx of 3 other lawyers, from Kensington and Wright. She wore navy blue this time, the color of authority. She sat with her spine straight, looking untouchable. On the other side, Gregory and Lucille looked like ghosts. They had been forced to use a public defender after Grimshaw sued Gregory for unpaid legal fees and leaked damaging privileged information to save his own license. Their lawyer was a young, overworked man named Mr. Henderson. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Drowning in the paperwork. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. Judge Patterson took the bench, but this time he wasn't alone. A forensic auditor sat near the witness stand, guarding a stack of binders 2 feet high. We are here to finalize the division of assets and address the counterclaims of fraud, Judge Patterson said, his voice echoing. Mr. Cole, you may proceed. Henry Cole stood up. He didn't need theatrics anymore. He had the math. Your Honor, Henry began, opening the first binder. The forensic audit of Dalton Tech has revealed a systematic looting of company assets. Over the last 7 years, $3 million was diverted to shell companies registered to Lucille Dalton. The gallery gasped. Lucille shrank into her coat, pulling the collar up as if she could hide. These funds, Henry continued, relentless, were used to purchase jewelry, finance vacations to St. Bart's, and cover significant gambling debts in Atlantic City, all labeled in the company ledger as R&D consultation fees. Gregory stood up, his voice cracking. I didn't know. She told me she had family money. You signed the checks, Mr. Dalton, Henry said, holding up a blown-up image of a canceled check on a display screen. This is your signature. You authorized every single penny. I just signed what she put in front of me. Gregory stammered. It was the ultimate admission of incompetence. The tech genius, the self-made man, admitting he was nothing more than a puppet. Furthermore, Henry said, turning to the judge, we have established that the core intellectual property of Dalton Tech, the algorithm for the predictive software, was authored entirely by Samantha Kensington Dalton. The patent application filed by Gregory Dalton bears a fraudulent declaration of inventorship. Mr. Henderson, Judge Patterson looked at the public defender. Do you have a defense? Mr. Henderson stood up, adjusted his glasses, and sighed. He knew he was fighting a forest fire with a water pistol. Your Honor, my clients plead incompetence. They argue they did not understand the complex financial structures involved. Incompetence is not a defense for fraud, the judge snapped. Especially not when you are the CEO of a publicly traded entity. The judge turned to Samantha. The room went deathly silent. Mrs. Dunn, or should I say, Miss Kensington, you have the leverage here. You hold the debt note. You own the IP. The prosecution is ready to move forward with criminal charges based on this evidence. The judge leaned forward. What is your request? This was the moment. The entire courtroom held its breath. Samantha stood up. She walked to the center of the room, her heels clicking on the parquet floor. She looked at Gregory, sweating through his cheap suit, shaking like a leaf. She looked at Lucille, weeping silently, into a tissue. I don't want them to go to jail, Samantha said softly. Gregory looked up, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. He thought she was showing mercy. He thought she was still the soft, pliable woman he had married. Jail is too easy, Samantha continued, her voice dropping to a temperature that froze the blood in Gregory's veins, and it costs the taxpayers money. I want them to understand what it means to start over, to truly start over. She turned to the judge, her expression hardening into diamond. I am calling in the loan from the AR to Miss Group. Since the debtor cannot provide immediate repayment, I am exercising the foreclosure clause. I am taking the company. I am taking the mansion. I am taking the contents of all frozen accounts to satisfy the debt. Granted, Judge Person said firmly, his pen scratching across the order. However, Samantha added, I am not a monster. I will not throw them out in the snow with nothing. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single thin envelope. She walked over to the defense table, placed it in front of Gregory. It looked terrifyingly light. What is this? Gregory whispered, his hands shaking as he touched the paper. It's a deed, Samantha said, to the cabin in upstate New York. The one your father left you before he died. The one you tried to sell last year but couldn't. Because it was too rustic for your portfolio. It's a shack, Gregory choked out, a rotting hunting cabin in the Adirondacks. It has no electricity. It has a wood stove. It's in your name, Gregory, Samantha said. It's the only asset I didn't touch. It's paid off. It's a roof over your head. You expect us to live in a shack? Lucille shrieked, clutching her chest. I am a Dalton. No, Samantha said, cold as ice. You are a debtor. And as of today, you are homeless. You have the cabin, and you have the clothes on your back. She paused, looking Gregory dead in the eye. And Gregory? He looked up at her, tears finally streaming down his face. Yes, Sam? I'm keeping the dog. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the courtroom. But Samantha didn't smile. It wasn't a joke. It was the final severing of ties. The golden retriever, Barnaby, whom Gregory had ignored for years, was the only living thing in that house worth saving. Order, the judge called, hiding a grim smile of satisfaction. Judgment is entered in favor of the defendant. Dalton Tech is hereby transferred to the control of Samantha Kensington. The remaining assets are seized. Case closed. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot ending a life. Security guards moved forward, not to escort Samantha out, to escort Gregory and Lucille. They had to hand over their watches, their corporate iPhones, and the keys to the mansion, right there in the courtroom. Samantha didn't watch them leave. She turned to Henry Cole. It's done, she said. Letting out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 10 years. Not quite, Henry smiled, checking his own phone. Mr. Sterling is on line 1. He wants to know if the new owner of Dalton Tech is willing to restart merger negotiations. He's offering 20% more than he offered Gregory. Samantha smiled. It was a real smile, one that finally reached her eyes. Tell him I'll meet him, she said, but not at the office. Where then? Tell him to meet me at the Bluebird Diner. Henry raised an eyebrow. The diner where you used to wait tables? Yes, Samantha said, picking up her bag. I want to remind myself where I came from, and I want to make sure I never forget that the person serving the coffee might just own the place one day. She walked out of the courtroom, the heavy doors swinging open for her. Outside, the sun was shining, the snow was melting, the winter was over. The cabin was exactly as Samantha had described it, a rotting tooth in the jaw of the Adirondacks. For Gregory Dalton, the tech genius who once complained if his Egyptian cotton sheets were under 600 thread count, reality was now a nightmare of blistered hands and freezing drafts. He spent his days chopping wet wood just to keep the cast iron stove from dying, while Lucille sat in a moth-eaten armchair, wrapped in blankets, staring at the peeling wallpaper in bitter, toxic silence. The sharpest blow came 3 months later in the local general store. Gregory, wearing dirty boots, counting crumpled bills for a loaf of discounted bread, glanced up at the small television mounted in the corner. CNBC flashed a headline in gold: Phoenix Rising. Samantha Kensington on the future of tech. There she was. Samantha looked radiant, sitting in a sleek studio, wearing a blazer that cost more than Gregory's truck. She explained how she had tripled Dalton Tech's valuation in under a year. The code was always good, she told the interviewer, with a cryptic, knowing smile. The company was just suffocated by ego. We stripped that away. Gregory stood frozen in the aisle, clutching his bread. He watched as the interviewer congratulated her on her engagement to Michael Sterling. He realized then, standing in the dust of a hardware store, he had never been the success story. He had been a parasite, and the host had finally cut him loose. Time moved relentlessly. Lucille passed away during the third winter, her heart simply giving out under the weight of her own resentment. Gregory buried her in the cheapest plot available. There were no mourners, no flowers from the Hamptons crowd, no eulogy. Alone and unable to bear the ghosts in the cabin, Gregory sold it for scraps and returned to the city. But the name Dalton was toxic. No firm would touch him. No bank would lend to him. Desperation forced him into a uniform. He became a banquet server for a high-end catering company, learning the art of becoming invisible to the wealthy people he used to call peers. 5 years after the divorce, fate arranged one final meeting. It was the Tech Innovators Gala at the Met, the biggest night of the year. Gregory was working the floor, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, his back aching, his eyes kept low. Suddenly, the room went quiet. The crowd parted. Samantha walked in. She was wearing a gown that looked like liquid starlight. On her arm was Michael Sterling, looking at her like she was the only woman in the room. Gregory froze. He knew he should turn away. He knew he should hide, but he couldn't. He watched as she laughed at something Michael said, her head thrown back, radiant and free. Then she stopped. She looked across the room. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on the server, holding the tray of champagne. She didn't look away. She didn't glare. She didn't smirk. She simply looked at him with zero recognition. Her eyes slid past him as if he were part of the furniture, as if he were nothing. She turned back to her husband and walked into the ballroom, leaving Gregory standing there in his cheap uniform, holding a tray for people who mattered. He realized, with crushing finality, this was the true punishment. She hadn't just destroyed him, she had forgotten him. But the night wasn't over. Fate had one final, cruel twist. In the chamber, Gregory was assigned to table 1, the VIP section. He kept his head down, focusing on the blinding white tablecloths and the crystal glasses. Terrified of making eye contact, he approached the main guest with a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. "More wine, madam?" he asked, his voice rough, unused to speaking in rooms like this. "Yes, please." The voice stopped his heart. Gregory's hand convulsed. The bottle slipped just a fraction of an inch, and a single heavy drop of red wine splashed onto the pristine white cloth. It looked like a gunshot wound. Panic seized him. He grabbed a napkin, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." I'll get a fresh cloth immediately. I apologize. He looked up, bracing for the reprimand. Samantha sat there. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light, diamonds glittering at her throat like stars. Beside her sat Michael Sterling, looking at her with utter adoration, the kind Gregory had never been capable of giving. Samantha looked at the waiter. She didn't see a monster. She didn't see an enemy. She saw the gray hair, the stooped shoulders, the fraying cuffs of a polyester uniform. "Gregory," she whispered. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a curse. It was just a fact. Michael stiffened, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. He placed a protective hand on Samantha's arm. "You know this man, darling?" Gregory wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He braced himself for her revenge. She could have him fired on the spot. She could mock him to the entire table of billionaires. She could announce to the room that this shivering waiter was the man who tried to steal her empire. He closed his eyes, waiting for the blow. "I used to know him," Samantha said calmly, her voice completely devoid of malice. "A long time ago." She didn't expose him. She didn't destroy him. She simply looked at him with a pity that hurt worse than hatred. Hate implies you still care. Hate implies passion. Pity implies you are nothing. "I think we are fine for wine, Gregory," she said softly. "Thank you." He nodded, his face burning with a shame hot enough to melt steel. He turned to leave, desperate to escape the orbit of her success. "Wait," Samantha said. She reached into her clutch. She didn't pull out a phone to record him. She pulled out a crisp bill. She folded it and placed it gently on his tray. "For the service," she said, her eyes locking with his for the last time. "It's a tough job. I know. I used to do it. It was a $100 bill." Gregory walked away, navigating through the sea of laughing titans and power players. He pushed through the heavy kitchen doors, the sounds of the gala fading into a dull roar behind him. He went out into the alley and collapsed onto a plastic milk crate. It started to snow, big, wet flakes, just like that day at the mansion. The circularity of it was suffocating. But this time, he was the one in the cold. He was the one locked out. He looked down at the money in his hand. Every fiber of his ego screamed at him to rip it up, to throw it in the trash, to save a shred of pride. But he couldn't. He smoothed the bill out on his knee. He needed it for rent. Inside the warmth of the gala, the music swelled. Michael took Samantha's hand, squeezing it gently. "Are you okay?" he asked. Samantha looked at the swinging kitchen doors one last time, closing the chapter on the man who had thrown her away like trash. "I'm better than okay," she smiled, stepping onto the dance floor. "I'm free." Samantha's story isn't just about revenge. It's about realization. Gregory Dalton thought power came from a bank account, a mansion, a title. He thought he could discard a human being like a broken toy because he assumed she had no value. But he made the classic mistake of the arrogant. He confused kindness with weakness. Samantha proved true power isn't about what you have. It's about who you are when you have nothing. When they stripped her of everything, they revealed her steel. When they threw her into the cold, they didn't freeze her heart. They ignited her destiny. In the end, Gregory was left with exactly what he gave, nothing. And Samantha reclaimed the one thing he could never buy, herself. We all have a Gregory in our lives, someone who doubts us, uses us, or thinks we are just placeholders in their story. Let this be your reminder. Your value is not determined by how someone treats you. It is determined by what you do when the gates lock behind you. Don't just walk away, rise. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a verdict. Until next time, keep your head up.